Okay, so you have your scaphoid, your lunate, your triquetrum, your pisiform, hamate, capitate, trapezium, and trapezoid. Okay, now you have your metacarpals, your MP joints, your PIP joint, and your DIP joint.
Right, next we have the extensor carpi radialis longus, which originates here at the lateral epicondyle, and it inserts at the base of the second metatarsal, and the muscle belly is right here, and it does wrist extension and radial deviation. Now we have the extensor carpi radialis brevis, which starts at the common extensor tendon right here, and it inserts at the base of the third metacarpal, and all it does is wrist extension. Now we have the extensor carpi ulnaris, which originates at the common extensor tendon, and it inserts at the base of the fifth metatarsal, and it does wrist extension and ulnar deviation. Now we have the extensor digitorum, which also originates at the common extensor tendon, and it inserts at the base of the middle phalanges and the extensor expansion of the forefingers. Its action is proximal interphalangeal extension of the forefingers and MP extension of the forefingers. Now we have the extensor digit minimi, which also originates at the common extensor tendon and inserts at the extensor expansion of the fifth finger. And its action is proximal interphalangeal extension of the fifth finger and the metatarsal phalangeal extension of the fifth finger. Now we have the flexor carpi ulnaris, which originates at the medial epicondyle and posterior ulna and olecranon fossa. It inserts at the pisiform and hamate of the and fifth metacarpal, and it does wrist flexion and ulnar deviation. All right, now we have the palmaris longus, which originates at the medial epicondyle and inserts at the palmar aponeurosis, and it does wrist flexion. Now we have the flexor carpi radialis, which originates at the medial epicondyle and it inserts at the second and third metacarpals. It does wrist flexion and radial deviation. Now I have the flexor digitorum superficialis, which originates at the medial epicondyle coronary process in the anterior oblique line of the radius. It inserts at the shafts of the middle phalanges 2 through 5, and it does PIP flexion, MP flexion, and wrist flexion. Now we have the adductor pollicis, which originates at the second and third metacarpals, and it inserts at the transverse head into the ulnar side of base of proximal phalanx of thumb and the oblique head into the extensor expansion. And its action is it adducts the carpometacarpal joint and it adducts and assists flexion of MCP joint and aids in opposition of thumb. Now we have the flexor digitorum profundus, which originates at the anterior ulna in the interosseous membrane, and it inserts at the base of the distal phalanges 2 through 5. It does DIP flexion, PIP flexion, MP flexion, and wrist flexion. Now we have the flexor digiti minimi. Its origin is the hook of the hamate and the flexor retinaculum. Its insertion is the base of the proximal phalanx of the fifth finger, and its action is to flex the MCP joint of the fifth finger and assist in position of the fifth finger towards the thumb.
Now we have the manual muscle test for the extensor carpi radialis longus. So you position them next wrist extension and radial deviation, and their arm is out. You hold here and push them back to neutral. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, relax. Now we have the manual muscle test for extensor carpi radialis brevis, which is just like the last one, but they are more over top of their arm to rule out longus. So it's the same hand positioning, and you're pushing them back to neutral. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, relax. Now we have the extensor digitorum manual muscle test. So the fingers are in extension, and you press down on all of them. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, relax. Now we have the manual muscle test for extensor carpi ulnaris. So their hand or their wrist is in extension and they are in ulnar deviation. and I'm pushing her back to neutral. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Now we have the manual muscle test for flexor carpi radialis. So they're in wrist flexion and in radial deviation. So this way, and I'm pushing her back to neutral. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Now we have the manual muscle test for flexor carpi ulnaris. So the wrist is in flexion and they're in ulnar deviation. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Now we have flexor digitorum profundus. This manual muscle test is used on phalanges 2 through 5, but I'll just demonstrate on one finger. So they're in finger flexion, and I am pulling up. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Now we have the manual muscle test for flexor digitorum superficialis, which is similar to the last one. You do these on phalanges 2 through 5, but I'll just demonstrate on one. So they're in finger flexion, and I am down here. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Now we have flexor digiti minimi. So this one's just for the 5th phalange. They're in flexion. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Okay. Now we have palmaris longus. So you ask them to touch their thumb and pinky together, and a little bit of wrist flexion. And I'm spreading their fingers apart. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax.
Next we have the abductor pollicis longus. So you want the person having their thumb out in abduction, and I'm trying to push them into adduction. You ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Next we have the adductor pollicis. So you want to bring their thumb into their index finger, and I'm trying to pry them into abduction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Next we have extensor pollicis longus. So bring their thumb into extension, and I'm pushing at the tip of the finger here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Relax. Now we have the extensor pollicis brevis. So again, their thumb is in extension, and I'm pushing at the base of the thumb and pushing it into flexion. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have the valgus stress test of the wrist. So just like with the elbow, placing your hands on either side of the joint and pushing in on the lateral side. Testing at 0, and again at 30. Now we have the varus stress test of the wrist, and same thing as the valgus stress test, but on the medial side of the wrist. So at 0, and again at 30.
Now we have the valgus stress test of the thumb. So just like the wrist, pressure on the lateral side.
Okay, now we have valgus of the fingers, so, and varus of the fingers, so.
Now we have AP glides of the wrist. So you put one finger on the ulna and one on the radius, and glide. And now we have cap refill. So you should pinch at the fingernail, and it will turn white, and then in a few seconds the pink should return back.
Now we have extensor carpi ulneralis, which originates.
Yeah? Uh-huh.
Now we have the adductor pollicis brevis.
Yeah?
Gamma, alpha, omega.
Now we have the adductor pollicis brevis, which originates at the flexor retinaculum.
Uh-huh.
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
Now we have the manual muscle test for flexi.
Now we have valgus. Now we have varus stress test of the elbow, and same thing as the valgus.
Run.
I don't know, is it?